Hey, hello everyone. It's Wednesday. You're probably wondering why Thorne's here. It's Wednesday because Thorne's generally on Fridays. But I thought it was a good day to bring in Thorne and Ricky together for our new show about being othered. Ricky changed the topic of our show last week. So, do you see that fast integration happening?
Yeah, that's beautiful. It is beautiful.
So,
Wow.
so Thorne, we will be interviewing you. Ricky had this idea that we should bring on other people and interview them about their experience with culture or intersections of culture and astrology. So, we're kind of interviewing you. So, I'll ask you questions and then Ricky will add comments and I'll add comments. Does that sound good?
Do we have birth information?
You want to share your chart with Ricky? Yeah, I can share my big three. How's that? Um, okay, so my rising is Leo, and I have Mars and Saturn rising in the first house. And then secondly, I'm a Cancer moon with Venus and Jupiter in Cancer in the 12th. And I'm a Gemini sun and Mercury in the 11th house.
Perfect.
Ricky, do you want the actual birth data?
That'd be ideal, but yeah, that'd be ideal.
Yeah, I can give it to you.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, so it's June 8th, 1978. And the time is 11 in the morning.
11 on the dot
Yes, 11 on the dot. Okay.
and Donde.
And my mom well, for the lot time, for a long time, my mom thought it was 11:30, but I had to double check. It's actually 11. So I know it's 11 on the dot. And I was born in Portland, Oregon. So
I've been
yeah,
there before. Perfect. All right. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. Ricky likes to sleuth out the chart during the show. I've noticed that's starting to happen recently. But I'm noticing that both of you are Gemini Sun, Cancer Moon, so that's cool.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And both are South Node in Aries in the eighth house. Yeah.
wait, so where's yours?
Mine is 22 degrees Aries in the eighth house.
Okay, mine is nine. It's the ninth house, I think, actually.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
maybe different house systems or something. Yeah.
That'll do
Yeah, I
it.
tend to use whole sign houses.
That'll do it.
What do you use, Ricky?
I use Placidus.
Ah, I see. Okay. All right, cool. Okay, well, Thorne's the perfect person for this show because Thorne definitely knows topics like the other and intersections of things. So I think this is a great topic to start with. So the first thing we should talk about is how do we define the other in general? Like being
Right.
othered, or what does that mean?
It's someone who has access to something that we do not.
Okay.
And
Um,
and I and at the core of that is access to experiences. So information, well, experiences, and I mean information and knowledge, the kind you can only get from an experience, not from reading a book. But there is an other of literate and illiterate that would create otherness because it's you don't have the ability on your own to conceive of or to perceive what to feel what someone else's experience is.
Interesting. So yeah, I could respond to that with, let's see. So otherness or othered uh in this space. Since I am deaf personally, and I am of a different tangent from other, I have a different perspective or tangent than other astrologers. Uh I find that it's more of where my deafness, for lack of a better word, is can give me an opportunity to understand or perceive things in a way that hearing people or hearing astrologers do not, because they don't have that opportunity or access to how I can develop my skills with what I can use and work with. So work with it in that way.
Yeah. Mhm. And when I think of otherness, the thing that jumps out of my mind is an opposition, specifically like opposing signs. Because in order to have the right, it's like they're the furthest things away from each other in a chart. And one of the things about the furthest thing away is that it tends to require more time, more effort, just more resources in general to get there. So I think one of the challenges with otherism is that it requires a lot of effort to make the connection, as opposed to people who are just like you. It doesn't require much effort to have that kind of connection with them.
Interesting. Interesting. So the fact that people are different, just differing, whatever, makes them other to each other. Like, can there be a case where people are perfectly equal other to each other? That's a good line. Other to each other. Come on.
Yeah. Well, I think the reality, and I think it comes out in partnership, is that well, I think when we're trying to make like when we're falling in love, you know, it's like we idealize or we just don't see the otherness, But it's like when we get locked into partnership, it starts to become obvious. And I think a long lasting partnership thrives on the appreciation of the otherness. It's like the scene in that movie. Uh, Forgot the name of the movie, but with Jerry Maguire. Um, that's the name of the movie, Jerry Maguire, with Tom Cruise. And they walk in the elevator at the end and say, "You complete me." Sign language. Oh, funny. So this idea of the only way we can be complete is if we have an openness to otherness.
For sure. For
That
sure.
any opportunity of otherness is an opportunity for greater completeness.
For greater what?
Completeness.
So it's like one and seven go together. I mean, like with ourself, that's one, house one. We see the other of humanity in the seventh house. Like if I'm a Gemini rising, then maybe I'm looking for Sagittarius traits on the other, so do you think of like 1-7 as a pair kind of there?
It's an ideal pair, but in order to cross that chasm, you have to make peace with otherness.
Yeah, so that's that 1-7 pair or partnership for sure is happening. I think I can validate that and verify that. Because my Leo rising, that Mars and Saturn there, I always will look for that, Aquarius opposition of, how can I connect with that Aquarius part of me or that Aquarius person? How can I appreciate that? How can I give, that and value that ability of connection with that sign? So I find that that is true. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think from a body type perspective, people actually look for people with the body type of their seventh house. It's like that really I mean, we can't really distill it down to only 1 and 7. Maybe the whole chart of the other person completes you, but 1-7's a good beginning.
Well, I think the 1-7 is because it locks directly into the otherness. And I think the 1-7 is universal, and then we can see just oppositions in general will also connect this to us. But I think the archetype is the 1-7. And I think about I'm a Virgo rising, 18 degrees Virgo rising, and my wife's strongest planet is Mercury, and it's at 18 degrees Pisces. You know?
Oh,
And
yeah, that's
and
opposite.
and right, and there's wonderful, and she's right, great. And still there's sometimes, right, where she says something and it requires a lot of effort to be able to hear it. it's a 1-7, and I notice it over and over again. And if I'm not aware of it, I go to a a dark place. I become an otherist, right? I'm sucked into otherism. It's like that, okay? But if I can be aware of it and I realize, okay, there's something there that is difficult for me to see and appreciate, but one of the reasons I'm having this experience is to help me cross that chasm. There's a missing piece that I don't have, and I need the other in order to gain access to it.
That's for sure. Well, like you two are very different from a cultural perspective, right? Like Thorne and Ricky have different cultural upbringings, different, just probably community spheres and things. So you could have come on the show noticing all the otherness of each other, right? But what you did notice was that you both have a Gemini sun and a Cancer moon. So you notice the sameness. So what can we put a spin on this and say, what about sameism? Like, is if there's othering, is there saming? Like,
Yeah, yeah. So it's funny. To me, the direct correlate, it's not a direct correlate. The loose correlate is the way we think of easy aspects and hard aspects. Because at least my understanding, even the rationale behind it is kind of otherness, otherness and sameness. And I think we might call it love, right? And I was gonna say earlier, the thing that motivates us to make the effort to get to the other, right? This is the value of love, right? Is there something same? There's some sameness, whether it's a lot or a little, but there's some that is so valuable to me that I'm willing to work to get to to make a connection with the rest of the other parts of. And so I think there is sameness, right? In the word like. That's what it means, same. So so I think there is the parts that are easy for us to like are the parts that are the same. And the parts that require more effort for us to appreciate and like are the parts that are other.
any thoughts? Any thoughts there, Thorne? Yes. So I would offer, just from my perspective, not only that there's some, the idea of love and wanting to build a connection and cross that chasm with love, but I think with me it tends to be curiosity as well. What makes me curious about this person? What motivates me to want to connect with them? What, makes my attention stick on them, makes me curious. I'm a very, very curious person, honestly. And I would like to ask all these questions. Why this? What about this? And sometimes people, I say, how can you be so curious? But it's natural. I think it's internalized in me. It's just a natural expression. I think that's the Mercury rules my sun, I'm a Gemini, and that's how I communicate is with curiosity. We want to know the world, the world function, the function of the world and how it works. And so I think if you lead with curiosity, then you're more open to connecting and you can actually cherish that. My Cancer does the cherishing part, where I just really love and connect with people and open up my heart to them. So I think it's a process where I do agree with it's the sameness or likeness, where you notice, oh, we're alike in all these ways. And then how the differences or challenges, that the aspects, even challenging aspects or things, how can that friction kind of open up into the building aspect, or you can actually break down through that friction. So
Yeah, I think the only way, big statements. I think one of the main ways that it can open is love. And I want to expand my definition of love. Because love and sameness, right? There's a desire to have more of the sameness than we currently have. Right? That's a recognition of other, but the desire to do something about it, to have that feeling of love motivates us to bridge the gap. And I'd say the way I'd say it manifests through a Gemini is very mental, right? And so like or mental is coming together of the minds. And so I think curiosity isn't an expression of a desire for love on the mental plane, right? And you can feel it, right? It's even when you say it. I mean, maybe again, the Gemini, we both have Gemini Cancer, but it's we call it the love of knowledge, the love of knowing. We could even say the love of thinking, the love of making connections, right? It's like, and it's the Gemini is the two, right? And I think a lot in tarot, it's the lovers. There's right, there's the that
Yes.
it jumps out in esoteric astrology. Venus rules Gemini, so there's a lot of things that connect curiosity to love, and I don't think you can truly love without curiosity. And Gemini comes before, or it's the air sign before Libra.
Interesting. I'm noticing how much of the same you guys are. No, I don't know. I was like, you are so same. Okay. No, I know. Um, yeah, it's a comparison. So okay, now let's go back to gender. Okay, I'm going to a different topic altogether because Ricky talked a lot about gender because this show is about intersections of like race, class, gender, anything, and astrology, right? So let's talk about gender and astrology a little bit. So okay, do you both notice, or how much do you notice the gender of your client when you're doing a reading? Now, you two come from different gender perspectives. Okay. So that's why I'm asking this question. Okay. So, how much does gender influence the reading for both of you? I don't know who wants to start. Okay. Ricky, do you want to start?
I'm sorry, yeah,
I'm
a
flexible.
whole bunch, a whole bunch. A whole bunch. And it's at the core of why we're doing this podcast, because we can, and I think this is why we're seeing such a revolution in these concepts right now, because the reality is the past is gender is it's like was fixed, right? And not just fixed in our biology, but the what you were able to do, right? It very similar to race, but I'd say gender even more so. And so I can understand if so much of my identity is based on something that I don't even control, it's like, screw that. So that's just evidence that it's something that's powerful in the expression of someone's chart, and even more powerful in the conditioning of the chart from the time they were born until they show up in front of me. So I have to take it into consideration a lot to be able to appreciate who this person is, where they've come from, and what their trajectory is.
For me, I would say that it's a factor, but it is not the core of it. It's part of it, and it adds to who the person is, who they are as a person. Like it's like a flavor on top of their chart, it's like that person. So we have the chart and we say, okay, we're all these things, and we say, how can I connect and support this client? So for me, it allows a map to get to know them through that chart, of how can I support them, you know, and kind of view their journey with gender and identity and all this kind of stuff. And it's part of it, but it's not the core of it. Now, really, because I do believe that the soul itself, that is the core of a human, so. Huh.
So my belief is that the soul is gendered. So I think maybe that's the difference. Also,
Wait, the soul is gender or gendered or has a gender? Sorry.
yes, the soul is gendered. Yes, the soul
And so
has
it
a gender.
has a gender.
Uh-huh. That's
Okay.
my belief. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, Thorne, what do you believe about that? So I believe that it's very fluid. It's fluid. Like it's not fixed in that way.
Um, but it is. Meaning, right? If you wanna produce a child, that's fixed. It's fixed. It's fixed, right? You have to have this and you have to have this, right? Meaning the egg and the sperm, right? They have to come together. in order for something to grow. So it is fixed. The other thing, what I was gonna say about, I agree that it is a layer, but I think I view myself as a healer. And so if I'm in a place where everyone has the same disease, right? For me as a healer, I would think it's my job to first and foremost treat the disease that everyone has. Because it's, and I think right now in our in the world, we have a disease around gender. I mean, when I say disease, I mean dis-ease, right? There's a lack of ease around it. Same way with race, and I think that's why it's so important we're having these conversations. So if someone comes in, like the number one thing I feel I'm treating, right, in the soul, just in right is gender. So I think it's central to when I'm speaking to someone because it's such a core part of our identity. As much as hard as we try to make it not, it still is.
So
And I think
I do feel
yeah,
that
sorry.
I do feel like that the biological part that is fixed, to make a foundation, right? For that to, like a birth to happen, for example. However, I feel that this child, their soul always will have a they always will have a gender that will develop over time. But for me, for example, if the child is born and they're straight and cis, and their soul will be naturally evolve that way, because it aligned with their journey. But if the child is born and their soul is very fluid with gender, then they're aware of that, then it will change throughout their life. They might be transgender. So I think the parents or the community can't necessarily control that. The context, the soul controls that. The soul controls, it knows at its core what its gender is. So for me, I work with a lot of trans clients, obviously. I work with non-binary people. So I think I see their gender as a layer on top of the chart. And I noticed that, where that fluidity is, I do work also with many straight cis people as well. I mean, I think I run the gamut here. So I think I can see the difference in those where there's it can be a fixed part and there can be a fluid part. And I think they're both beautiful to see where those intersections occur. So
I
again, I
I
feel that it's the soul at the core.
yeah, I guess when I say fixed, because to me, straight says that has nothing to do with gender. It's expressing through gender, but it has nothing to do with gender. That's the point I'm trying to make. It's these rules that we attach to gender that make people feel they have to be this or that, but it has nothing to do with it, right? But when we have the certain expectations of what one's supposed to be and how someone's supposed to act, right? That's I think where the disease comes from. That's why it's the first thing that I'm treating is to help people separate the two because the way we've been taught is they're so intimately connected. And to me, fluidity, right? You see fluidity in language, right? That comes in all shapes and forms, right? We try to ascribe it to certain, but it doesn't quite stick. So so that's what I mean. And to me, this is part of the healing. And when I say we all have to, it's something we all suffer from, that's even us. And so that's why I'm always so conscious of it to allow a space for that healing to uncover. Because I don't claim to know. And this is one place where I think we need more curiosity of what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean? We typically don't ask those questions. We just have our training about it and we either agree or we disagree or we're conflicted about it.
So, okay, so if there's a trans client and a cis straight astrologer, is there an othering happening? Does there have
100
to be or not?
there has to be. But right, the love or the curiosity, right? It allows that gap to close. 100 there has to be. But right, the love or the curiosity, right? It allows that gap to close. 100 there has to be. But right, the love or the curiosity, right? It allows that gap to close. 100 there has to be. But right, the love or the curiosity, right? It allows that gap to close.
Hmm.
It's not comfortable. It
There has
requires
to be
effort.
another, it would be the focus. I mean, from what you're saying, Ricky, it would be if I was the cis straight astrologer and I focused on the fact that we were different, like they were trans and I'm straight. If I focused on that, then there would be an othering situation. But if I focused on how we're the same and I didn't, it's not like I ignored the gender difference, but it just was, I was like nonplussed. I was like, whatever with the gender difference. I mean, is it possible to treat someone who's different than you in a way as to not other them?
I don't think othering is bad. I think when we don't realize we're othering, that's where we get into trouble. I think othering is where the work is done. I think that's where the magic happens. Because that's what I was saying is there's certain, to me, the most, and it's we see it in money. The most valuable things are the things we have the least access to. And so, right, the most valuable thing is a perspective that I can't even imagine because I'm missing half of the I'm missing half of the story.
So, Thorne, what do you think? Well, so meaning related to that situation, like, do you think there's, yeah, the straight astrologer and the trans client? Yeah, is there anothering happening or, well, okay, so with that situation, I think if the straight astrologer and there's a trans client, I think the othering there, it would be an influence, yes, because there's just different cultural differences and experiences there. The identities are different. So, however, if if the space could be co-created together between the two people in agreement where they recognize it, but they say, okay, there's a difference here. You and I are different. And though we are willing, you are willing to listen as the client and, how can that person how can we collaborate and advocate in that with the client in that situation? So we need a kind of that in order to have the client, you know, as far as understanding the next steps. So the I would I would encourage not so much focus on where the difference is, but the balance of recognizing where there is a difference and then also saying, how do we connect, with the sameness of the human experience? So that's a
Yeah,
balance that I would
yeah.
offer.
I would say, how can we appreciate?
Yes.
So, like a form of othering that I get that no one even realizes is occurring, right? Right,
Is
and
a
I'm
what?
like is occurring, is happening,
Oh, it's
and
happening.
and I'm guessing this is very similar to veterans, people that have been in high stress combat situations. You know, is there are certain, and this is why I go back to my first definition, there are just certain experiences that you don't even have the ability to imagine. You don't have access to because you haven't been in that situation. And I think it's being a professional athlete or a professional football player. It's like, and so when two people meet, there's this expectation of how we're supposed to behave. But the expectation doesn't take into consideration the depth and intensity of what I've seen relative to our cultural training. And if we don't appreciate that otherness or that difference, we're not really going to be able to do much together. But if we can appreciate it and we can and learn to appreciate what we can gain from the other experience, like we become more whole. I think that's why I'm an astrologer. It's because I get to sit with and see and appreciate the otherness of everyone that I speak with. And so in that it's like I've become more whole, or at least I have a greater appreciation of the whole.
Yeah, I want to speak back to something Thorne said about the space. I think that's a really cool idea that depending on the space where we meet, the othering can happen in a kind of unequal way or not, right? Like so like in this space of this show, we're all equal, right? We are all other to each other in some way, but the point of the show is finding equality in astrology at large or whatever, right? So do you think how much does the space that's created allow for a healthy respect of othering?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is the mental space that's created by the astrologer's conception of what an astrological chart is.
Hmm, that's a good one. Because okay, Thorne saying I would also mention that the space is co-created. It's co-created for equality, um, of how to recognize fully the two people and say, okay, we can see eye to eye here. And there's an appreciation of who they are and their differences. At the same time, there's a curiosity and also allowing that joy that you experience. Because honestly, I feel that now out there, a lot of people have lost that joy. They've lost that sense of, wonder and I want to know you and I want to know this person and I'm really curious about you. It's not just this surface thing like who are you and kind of thing. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's more of that, joy and wonder saying, how can I see who you are and find out who you are inside? And that's a certain space as well.
yeah. And I think that's what otherism destroys. It makes that space impossible. And a lot of times it seems like it comes from fear. It comes from fear because when people are not curious about who someone is, it's because they've already decided who the person is, and they've decided that it's some kind of threat to them.
Hmm, interesting.
And so the inner parts of us that we're not willing, and this brings it back to me directly to astrology, is I think when I'm looking at someone's chart, my first question is what parts of their chart, what parts of their psyche are they aware of, are they saming, and what parts of their psyche are they othering? Because wherever in their chart they're othering, that's how we're going to find in the outside world who they're othering. And so
Awesome. Oh,
the first question is always how aware, how first, where are they othering? How aware are they othering? And if they're not aware that they're othering, it's like, well, we got a lot of work to do. But you can see it in the chart.
okay, yeah, for sure. And also, I would add that it's not only that, well, what do I want to say here? Um, it's not a closed off stance. I would also say that maybe the distrust that happens, that you can say, can this person actually see me eye to eye? Are they actually curious? Are they actually wanting to understand me as a person? And I think a lot of that is lost in that space because there's a lot of different factors, of course. Um, but back to the bottom line is the human experience. That's the center of where we meet and you say we're both human, we're both bringing experiences to the table, and both of us are on this journey together. And at the core, there's this journey, and so we can build something there. Yeah, it makes me think of the activist, like they talk about power over, power with, or power under. And it seems like if there's a power over space where one person is over the other, whether it be the astrologers over the client or the clients over the astrologer, which rarely we would see that. But that power differential of like, I'm the astrologer and I know everything about you and all that's like power over. So it seems like a power with space allows for the othering to happen, but not be a detrimental thing. I mean,
Yeah.
power
That's
with
why
baby.
that's why I said the space, what came to mind was how the astrologer views the chart. And I can extend that to say how they view the relationship, how they view the other person. Because when the relationship starts, there is a power differential. Um, and I think sometimes the people coming for the reading want to keep it that way, and sometimes they don't. Um, but there is a power differential because based on knowledge of, right, if someone is coming to see an astrologer, it's because you have something that they would like, so there is a power differential. And I think it's the astrologer's job to give the power back, right, the power that's given, to give it back so it's equal, so that there can be a journey together. And to me, the way that manifests is when the person realizes that you don't think you know, that you're approaching it with curiosity, something like holding a mirror to reflect back to them. Oh, I find that's when the magic happens.
Yeah. That's deep. Well, because have you guys experienced a client who like gives you way too much power? They're like, "Tell me everything in my chart. Who am I? What am I here to do?" And all this stuff. And you're like, "Listen, I'm just a." That's why I always wear like rock t-shirts, and because people will be like, "You're my guru," and I'm like, "I'm your rocker astrology professor." Okay, like I'm not that. Like they'll give me like a power differential that's like that big, and I'm like, "Oh, let's go with like this big." Like. I don't like that huge power differential thing. It's like the guru typology. I don't know. Thorne. Um, I feel that is very much my Libra part that I'm always looking for how I can partner up and how I can equalize and have an equal partnership. And I'm not interested in that power differential personally. I'm a big advocate for the power with structure. I'm always wanting that, power balance and how can we connect? How can we make a contact? How can we share our knowledge and help to understand, better so that we all start to understand. So I'm very encouraging of my clients. And so I can kind of encourage them to, gain more and more power throughout the reading. So I'm
Yeah,
always love when that happens in a working relationship when it comes to astrology. Yeah, I love it. Okay, you guys want another question?
sure.
Okay, see. Okay.
Well,
Oh,
I mean, yeah, I do want another question, but this is, it's curious. I'm curious because looking at Thorne's chart, it's hard for, it's hard for the word power to not like keep coming up, coming up, coming up, coming up. It just seems like a really powerful theme.
so what do you see in the chart that makes you think of the power theme?
So for me, the sun represents the urge for significance or the urge for power. And the sun in my system, the sun in the chart is the strongest planet. And it rules the ascendant, and seeing Saturn and Mars conjunct the ascendant, South Node in Aries. It's a lot of things. It's a whole lot of things. Um,
Well, Thorne is very powerful in the deaf community, especially. I know that here they're very like chill, but they are a very powerful actor in the deaf community. I mean, you're like an activist in the deaf community. Like what? Yes, yes, I do identify as an activist and among other things. So, yeah. They're a community builder and they do a lot of coordination of services and they're really working to try access. Yeah, they're really working to try to like make a robust deaf astrological community. I mean, we just got started with that, but it's going to take years of work, but they are a very powerful person. So,
yeah, and just right, because when there is a lot of power, something that becomes a must is learning what how to handle it, what to do with it. And even if someone, right, because even if someone doesn't want, I think that's when we get into the most trouble, when someone doesn't want to be powerful because there's so many negative ideas and conceptions about what it means, so someone doesn't own their power. um,
hmm. Um, you know, I just want to say something related to that. So I think it's interesting because since, let's see, for the past 2 years, I have been really working deeply with my Leo parts of my chart. Where can I really stand up and be more brave and, own it, own myself and I do have that power to say, how can I do well, how can I do something good with it? Even if it's naturally and very humble as far as Leo goes, now I'm learning how to really stand up and say, okay, that's fine. I'm humble, but at the same time, can I be brave and show the way for how to work with this appropriately instead of being egoic, being more of, okay, how can I really express this in a good way for, the greater good of all concerned, not just myself. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate that ego gets such a bad rap. But if you read more deeply in spiritual stuff, right, the word they use to describe the divine spark, right, is the ego. And it's like, yeah, if something overflows, right, or becomes toxic, then we don't want it, but the toxicity isn't in the thing itself. And so the ego is not toxic. Too much anything is toxic. But in order to make a difference, because to me that's really what significance is, or even the point of being on this earth, is to make a difference. And the more power you have, the more of a difference you can make. And I think there's a true appreciation of that is the highest expression of humility.
Yeah, well, I think Saturn and Leo, we all have that, right? All three of
Mhm.
us have Saturn
Yeah,
and Leo.
yeah,
It's like it can be like o overly humble, like I'm a zero, like don't look at me, I'm a zero, like whatever. But it's like as we become older, it becomes more about like when can I root in that, soul consciousness and say I'm going to build a great version of myself.
yes.
It's like I feel like it's a builder of self, and you get really refined people in their older age. Like I love the Saturn and Leos as we're becoming older,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think an ego that you can be proud of, right? Because
and I'm
of the
starting to understand my Saturn better. Yeah.
yeah, ego you can be proud of because the time and effort you put into building it. Because it's to me, it's we can call it humility, but what I'm learning with Saturn is you just have to extend the timeline, right? Right. And so for a young person, right, because Saturn maturity, right, the ego's not mature yet. So yeah, right, it's gonna fall down and get drunk and shit on itself. But this just because it's not mature yet. But as it grows and becomes more and more mature, right. But I think if we have too much humility or a negative sense, we can retard that process. And when it's time for us to really be ready, right, we don't got it because we spent too much time being humble.
For sure, that's very possible. And also, I just want to add that for me, it is like I'm arriving at that place where I'm saying, yes, I can be a master at certain things. I can build that skill set, that mastery, and also I can always continue to learn and balance that and integrate it and say, okay, yeah, that's a beautiful balance, with that integration that's happening. So I really do appreciate that more than when I was young. I mean, come on, it's like I was just young. And now that I'm older, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, this is, I'm, right there. The point is right here. It's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, and it's true. I that we can say I can, but to me, it's Pluto the first. It's more intense. It's a tragedy if we don't attain mastery, because at the end of our life, it's like if we didn't master something, what were we doing?
All right. All right. Well, I do want to ask a question, so I'm going to change the topic. So, Thorne, so we are really focusing on intersection, of something culturally with astrology here. So I want to know where the intersections of deafness or being deaf, how does that intersect with astrology? Like, is there an intersection there? What is important about that intersection? How are deaf astrologers different than hearing astrologers or the same as hearing astrologers? I don't know, but what's the are there intersections of deafness and astrology? That's a good question. Um, I could say that with, where there are still barriers, with access, because the hearing astrologers, in general, they have the same access, meaning they can immediately have access to a bunch of things, but I have to plan more. I have to, really approach people and say, I'm going to be there. Will there be access or not? Things like that. And you have to understand that in the process of making an influence on the greater community, because that offers an opportunity for them to say, oh, okay, we need to make these spaces open for you to come in. And we need to partner up and not just reject that subset. So I think, there's a balance happening still, and we're still in the process because our deaf astrology crew is very, very small, and we still are fighting for our access rights still today. Even 2025, and we're still finding that as we need to really tear down those barriers to really get in there and say, how can we break down these barriers and, find that bridge, I would say that I do bring a special perspective with, the validation that in a human body that is deaf. And the perspective is that maybe there's something that the hearing astrologers are missing. We could flip the script on that and say, you know, we might see something that you missed and, equalize what we bring to the table there. Yeah. Ricky, it makes me think of how you said that the other is someone who doesn't have access to the experiences of the main group or whatever. I think with the deaf community, there is an othering happening because they don't have access to. I know because I've worked with conferences about providing access to interpreters and things. Now, I have interpreted at Kepler. I know they do provide interpreters there. But it's an interesting thing where there are blocks to access. And does that make an othering situation happen? I mean, what do you think of that, Ricky?
Well, my mind goes somewhere different when I think about access. Is because I think there's access that the deaf community has that we don't have,
Hmm.
and I think that's the value because right we each have different experiences based on identity. I think it's fair to say, but there are more there are some that are more central and more powerful than others, and I think this is a great example because and I don't know, I could completely be speaking out of my ass, but I think there's some value in not hearing the words that are coming out of people's mouths, right? Is that in so many ways words are used the way words are used and to create a shield and to hide certain things, right? And that's that's an experience that we have that's part of a big part of us. And if someone is taking in that kind of information through a different sense or a different lens, right? There's certain things that they're going to perceive that we're not. And to me, astrology is so vast. It's like, what a great tool to be able to communicate those things.
Hmm. That's a good one. Yeah. I mean, is your app okay? Is the Leela, well, you have a new name, Astrologic. Is that app? I mean,
Well,
an
it's
app.
Leela. There's Leela. Astrologic is my little thing that my in my garage that I tool on. But Leela is what's out there in the wild, in the public. Yeah.
But like apps are accessible to both. Um, there are some things we could focus on what we all do have access to. We could focus on that. Um, we could focus on where access is blocked. We could focus on the benefits of deaf astrologers and what they can perceive. So I feel like there's all these different ways we can view the issue, right? I do want to work to take down blocks to access. I do want to, that's one of my missions is to really take down that block because, yeah, I mean, I don't know.
No, I get it. I get it. So I mean, this is like mind blowing.
I want to add something.
This whole situation to me, this conversation is really mind blowing, and and I'm curious now. Are deaf astrologers? like how connected are they in working with the larger deaf community?
Thorne, you had a comment? Okay. Yeah, I can answer that actually, that question. From my own experience with my full understanding of professional work and deaf astrologers, I am one of them. There's another one, Vanessa guy. There's that's a BIPOC deaf blind astrologer. There's Carla, another one in Seattle, who's deaf, and then there's two or three others. There's three others, so that's five of us. I would say maybe there's up to maybe eight of us. And still we have our individual, you know, you know, places where we don't really intersect in our lives, but we do connect online. So we have different opportunities that come up with those connections. So in that way, the larger deaf community, it depends on who we are working with because we have our different areas. But in general, yes, in theory, we will have more access to working with the deaf community because that's our shared space and that's
Yes.
our shared identity and in the greater picture. But it
Wow.
becomes a subculture related to the identity with where we are. Because out of that eight, um, there's two of us who are queer. There's me and Vanessa that are queer. So there's five general cis straight. Um, and then so yeah, it's fascinating to see how that subculture comes into play and overlaps with all that. Okay. I'm sorry, you guys. I have to go to work, but we can have Thorne, you can come on again because I feel like we just scratched the surface of this puppy right here. So,
My mind is blown. This is
wasn't this a
fascinating.
fun one for you?
Yeah, this is awesome.
All
Yeah.
right. All right. I'll see you guys later. All right.
All right.
Love you both.
Yeah. Thank you. Great to meet you, Thorne.
All right. All right.